Welcome to AI-powered testing strategies for the seasonal shopping surge presented by Applitools. I'm Pam Morgan, and I will be the session host. I'm joined today by my colleague, Tim Hines, product marketing lead on the Applitools product team. Tim has worked in dev, QA, and ops tool development companies for more than 10 years. He's also been a startup founder, taking on the roles of product owner, full stack developer, UX designer, and automated manual tester.
So with that, let's jump into some fun stats. 89% of customers starting in their journeys on your retailer websites or apps. So they're staying there, making their purchases there, finding what they need, finishing up. Then you should know that 24% of all online shopping in 2023 happened during the holiday season. So it's quite a large chunk when you look at exactly how much was spent, which was $222.1 billion between November 1st and December 31st in 2023. And within that, 17.1% occurred on the 5 days between Thanksgiving and Cyber Monday. So those 5 days create a huge chunk of what retailers are experiencing from sales during that time period, and basically for the entire year. Now, quick aside, one thing I noticed when I was putting this presentation together is that stock photographers and stock actors don't seem to know that you can store your credit card information in your browser in Google Pay or Apple Pay there. Also, they all seem to be very, very happy when they're making these purchases. Hopefully that's the case on your site, but they also have a whole selection of people who are very, very frustrated on this. And this is kind of interesting from a realistic standpoint of the personas and the behaviors that we see whenever you're actually dealing with real online shoppers. Most of them don't actually get this frustrated with the app, because what they'll do is 61% say if they'll go to another site if they don't find what they're looking for within 5 seconds. And this is a stat from Forbes, so I'm not exactly sure how accurate that is, but I know if you have a lot of the same products, especially third-party products, are listed on multiple sites. You'll see the same ones on Amazon or Target or Walmart. So if they're not getting the experience that they need from your site, they can very quickly jump over to another site and make their purchases there. And then back to some of the more serious stats here. So 59% of sales happened on Thanksgiving happened on mobile devices. This is the highest peak of mobile device sales that occurred throughout the year. And then we see that actually jumps down just a little bit for other sales that happened during Cyber Week. But you can notice it's still above 50%. So most of the purchases that are happening now are happening through mobile devices. And you can sort of see why the difference would be between Thanksgiving and the rest of Cyber Week there, because if people are traveling, visiting their families, sitting on a couch watching football, they're going to have their mobile device right in front of them, probably not their laptop. And whenever they go back to the office on Monday for Cyber Monday, they'll be sitting in front of their laptop or PC or whatever they're dealing with there, and they can make their purchases directly on those. So the takeaway here is cross-browser, cross-device testing, very, very important. Experience across your desktop application, your mobile applications need to be very consistent. You need to make sure everything's appearing correctly to them and functions correctly. Now, 0.001% of shoppers used all of their devices on the same site at the same time, but they were all testers. That's you. And another thing you should note, 4.4% of the world population is colorblind, and even more than that have contrast sensitivity issues. This comes into play with accessibility, contrast specifically on buttons and text size as well. So that's got to be an important part of your testing for the holiday season, because 4.4% of 222 billion is still quite a large percentage of people that are doing it. So again, they can easily switch to a competitor's site that has done a bunch of accessibility testing and makes it a lot easier for them to make those purchases. So you need to accommodate those people, not just for the upcoming European Accessibility Act, but right now, so that you can capture those sales as they're happening. Now let's talk a little bit about your issues. So some of the challenges that we see for all testing teams that are occurring right now, volume. You've got huge surging numbers of interfaces, states, scenarios you've got to verify. The frequency of new features and deployments that are especially coming out with AI coding assistants and co-pilots from your development team. All of that code's got to be tested. Complexity, UIs are more complex and dynamic than ever, especially with e-commerce sites. Environments, obviously we covered this a little bit. The apps are accessed through thousands of browsers, devices, screen sizes, older phones, newer phones. It's going to be all over the place. And then resources, of course, we know that a lot of your budgets are being cut and you're being asked to do more with less. Now, specifically, some of the challenges for e-commerce testing teams that don't always exist for other applications. You've got a lot of data-rich scenarios where prices, product information, all that sort of stuff is going to be difficult to test. It's not something that is experienced across, let's say, like a B2B SaaS product. Multi-screen shopping, people will be using their phones. They'll be coming to your website afterwards on their desktop, making sure that their cookies transfer over so that their carts sync up with it. All those things need to be checked. Dynamic content, obviously, you're going to have lots of ads, lots of promotions that are occurring, banners, different products showing up in different searches. Localization, personalization, all of those things sort of fall into that dynamic content category that needs to be tested. And another thing that's going to be sort of big this season, that seems to be a trend, is going to be A/B experiments, and not just your typical A/B experiments of using one sort of promotion versus another, or one layout versus another, but there seems to be a trend towards marketing teams using AI to generate A/B experiments based off of buying activity that's occurred previously for those users. And then accessibility, we talked about this. That's a huge part of it. And then customer content, like reviews, is a huge one for e-commerce. So right at this point, we're going to do a little poll. Pam, do you want to pop that up? Great. So the poll here: what's your team's level of web application automation maturity? So I'll give a few seconds for everyone to answer here. So high is going to be leveraging both functional and visual validation through automation. Medium, sort of leveraging functional validation only. And then low, you're doing mostly manual testing or completely manual testing. And you can go ahead and just click on the screen there for the poll and then click vote, and we'll check those results in just a second. Okay. Wow, so you see most people here, a lot of you are probably Applitools customers. Leveraging both functional and visual validation through automation. 40% are just doing functional validation only, and a small percentage doing just manual testing here. So that's great. We can talk about some of the ways that that AI will be able to help you. So what can AI do? some categories of AI testing, and this is not completely comprehensive, but some of the things that we've seen popping up as new vendors are coming out to the market, new open source tools, new use cases that we see developed for older AI tools that have existed for a while. First one here, coding assistants, like Copilot, GitHub Copilot, Cody, Cursor IDE. A lot of these are going to be able to help you out with syntax, finding errors sort of immediately, generating unit tests. One that I found particularly useful is checking for performance hotspots on a single page of code that you're looking at the time. Your developers can actually do that very, very quickly before they even push any changes. So you should not have quite as many bugs coming into production, but developers are kind of notorious for not doing that. So a lot more code is going to be coming through, and some of this AI will be able to help you out later. Test case generators. Things like taking the requirements that are coming from Jira tickets or something from your issue tracking system and feeding that into a prompt so that it then creates test cases based off of that, so you can test the new code. That's interesting. I've having worked as an automated tester and a manual tester for a while, that I can see being very, very difficult to get correct. Using ChatGPT or even GitHub Copilot, where it's a little bit aware of what's going on in your code base. I've tried this. It doesn't always work. So it's still very early stages for that. Test code generators, these are a little bit better. Mostly because a lot of the testing frameworks that exist are very well documented. So things like syntax is really easy for it to create. Doesn't always get exactly the test case right. So you probably have to do some manual changes there. But we'll point out Applitools does have a tool called TestGen AI for Cypress. So if you're using Cypress, we've got a recorder that will allow you to record Cypress test, and then it'll generate the code directly, and you can paste that directly into Cypress and use it as if it were any other Cypress code. So a lot of these are sort of popping up now, and some of them are very useful if you've got a test automation framework already built out, like a lot of you do, and allows you to generate that code without having to write it. So even if you know how to code, it's just going to speed you up. Natural language test creation. This is not only just creating things directly from prompts, but also sort of laying out test steps in sort of plain English. We do this with our autonomous product at Applitools, and even I'll show it a little bit later. But one of the really, really cool things about the way that we do natural language and writing test steps in plain English is that it's sort of paired with a recorder, so that the test steps are then created in natural language and run in natural language by the AI. So it's not actually generating code. The AI, as it's running the test, interprets the test steps and runs them on page using those. And then you can go back and edit them in plain English. This makes it really easy for people who don't have coding skills to be able to contribute to test creation. Even some manual testing cases will be able to be sort of automated through this. And you just do sort of your normal recording with it, or normal click-throughs, and it'll write things out. You can parameterize variables. There's a lot of other things that you can do there, even using an LLM to correct some of the language that's there. Testing bots, another thing that seems to be gaining some steam here. A lot of them are sort of using your analytics, or they'll install an agent on your application. that can be a little bit resource intensive and take a performance hit. Not always. These are good for sort of helping you create test cases and define user flows. They've kind of existed for a while in the form of like synthetic monitoring tools. Those have been around a while, running on regular frequencies. It helps a little bit with the creation of more accurate user flows to the application based on your analytics. And then visual AI, the thing that Applitools does the best, the thing that we've invented. Some of this is not very well understood. So let me explain a little bit about the differences between just visual testing and visual AI as Applitools defines it. And I'll talk a little bit about some other tools that use visual AI and compare and contrast what they're doing there. So types of visual AI, so you've got sort of three main differences between the way that you can do visual testing. You've got pixel comparison, DOM diffing, and then visual AI. So what's pixel comparison? So basically, you're taking a snapshot of your application or the page that you're on, capturing it at various points to a test run, and compared to a baseline image that you had previously captured. And then it'll go through and iterate each pixel and check for color differences. And if the colors are different, it'll raise a visual bug. Right? Fairly simple. Now, the issues with that are things like dynamic content. Your e-commerce applications are obviously going to have a lot of dynamic content. You're going to have banners and your product list, your searches, categories. All of those things are going to be different. And those pixel comparison tools, unless they're completely ignoring everything that's there, and a lot of them don't even have that capability, you're going to get a lot of false positives that pop up from that. Same with display settings. So between different devices, browsers, not only do these usually have to have baselines that are captured for each and every device and screen size, but also just differences between even Safari, Chrome, Firefox will render things just a little bit differently. You might have font smoothing or anti-aliasing, things that will be pixel difference, but not meaningfully different. So not the way a human eye would interpret it. And then the DOM diffing is basically capturing the DOM for the page compared to the previous DOM, flagging any inconsistencies with the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, other assets that you have there. And then some of the challenges with that, obviously viewport changes or different devices, component sizes, locations might change. It's only available for web, not native mobile applications. And then also a lot of dynamic content can be missed there. You've got some broken embedded content, iframe changes, cross-browser issues, just dynamic content behavior in general, as it's sometimes the DOM will load on initial page load, and then you'll have some dynamic interaction with JavaScript that happens on the page, and it won't update the DOM as it's doing that. And you might not capture that immediately. Some tools will pause for a few seconds and let the rest of the page load, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to have multiple changes that happen after that point. So what's visual AI? So as we define it at Applitools, basically it combines learning algorithms to interpret the relationships between the rendered page and the intended display of the visual elements, actual visual elements and locations. So the benefits of that is that as you're taking snapshots, you can also use them as your functional test in a lot of cases. So things like calculations, if some text is showing up in one place and it's maybe got something that is crowding over it in another case and covering up a button, covering up some options, that's going to cause functional tests. This happens a lot with menus. A lot of navigation issues will pop up whenever you're rendering on different screen sizes. And then dynamic content, obviously, being able to ignore certain regions on the page where content's going to pop up, being able to validate the layout of the page rather than every dynamic element that's there. That's going to significantly reduce the false positives that you'd be experiencing with the pixel comparison or the DOM diffing. And some of the use cases where visual AI covers these and pixel comparisons and DOM diffing don't. Got a whole list here. I won't go through all of them, but some that are relevant to e-commerce, cross-browser testing, product content, ad content, search content, user-submitted content like reviews, suggested content like suggested searches, suggested products, dashboards for the actual user account, notification icons. A lot of this stuff is going to pop up with your e-commerce applications. And again, lots of false positives that will pop up with pixel comparison and DOM diffing. So you don't want to be manually going through and checking every single difference that occurs there. So Applitools, those of you who are familiar with it, our sort of core flagship product that we've developed for years now is called Eyes. The primary way that you work with Eyes is through the SDKs with your testing frameworks, Selenium, WebDriver, Playwright, Cypress, all these different ones. And then the visual AI is actually going to do the validation for functional visual accessibility testing. And we've got our intelligent infrastructure with the ultra-fast grid and execution cloud that'll do parallel execution at scale, self-heal locators, and do all your cross-browser and cross-device testing. And then AI will also help with automated maintenance, updating baselines whenever changes have occurred, but they don't need to necessarily be checked. Root cause analysis to identify exactly where in the code visual changes are flagged, and then some insights and optimizations, dashboards, and reporting. Throughout all of these steps, we're using some level of AI. Obviously, our visual AI is sort of our core part of that allows a lot of the things like the automated maintenance and root cause analysis, where it's comparing both the visual side of things and the DOM that you're seeing, so you can it'll take that into account with some advanced algorithms. And there are lots of different settings that you can do on the page to accommodate for dynamic content and differences between browsers, differences between layouts, colors, all of those sorts of things. And more recently, we've launched our autonomous product. And I should mention both of these are a part of the intelligent testing platform that we've rolled out here. Autonomous is it's more designed to allow more people on your team, not necessarily everyone who has coding skills, but even those who do have coding skills, it tends to make them a lot faster at creating tests. So parts that can be fully autonomous, we've got a website crawler that'll crawl your site, go through your sitemap, get a list of all of the URLs there, or you can upload a specific list of URLs you want to test. It'll create a snapshot of all of those pages and create baselines for every single page that you've got there. And then on subsequent runs, it'll basically do visual regression testing, and you can do customization afterwards for each snapshot. So if you want to do dynamic layout or something like that, you can do that on your next runs, and it'll get smarter as it goes along there. And obviously that is going to give you a huge boost in your test coverage. So if there are pages on your site where you need to validate them that they look correct, there aren't visual regressions that are happening from one version to the next, and you don't necessarily need to test all of the functionality that's on that page, the website crawler test is very, very good for that. And then there's this AI-assisted natural language test builder and a no-code codeless recorder that work in tandem with each other. And I'll show this on the next slide how that actually works. But then at the validation layer, it's using the visual AI from eyes to do the visual checks. So it'll have that in there for the website test and for the natural language and codeless recorder tests. You can add those visual checks at any point in those tests. And it'll cover functional visual API testing. Some of the functional testing will actually be data assertions, API testing that can be done during the sort of recording and natural language process building there. And then it also leverages our intelligent infrastructure for parallel execution, cross-browser, cross-device testing, so that you can set up all of your most common devices, all of your most common browsers, and run those in parallel. It does it very quickly, 9 times faster than most tools that are executing these, as it's actually rendering the screens from a single recording and putting them across all those devices so that you don't actually have to maintain baselines for every device or browser that you're doing there. And then some automated maintenance dashboards, reporting, insights, and optimizations to allow you to figure out exactly what's going on with it. Right now, this covers websites and web app testing. It doesn't do native mobile testing at this moment, but it does integrate with your CI/CD and with your issue tracking systems as well. So the really cool things that Autonomous can do, the website scan, you can see here what I've got going on, where you're entering the URLs are a single URL for the site. It's going to grab all of the URLs there, create this full website test, and then you can create custom flow test, which allow you can see there's an interactive browser off to the side. It's recording those, and as it's recording them, it's creating or generating all of those steps in plain English. And you can also then go and add any steps that you want to in plain English. If you write a bunch of steps, if you write something that seems like it should be multiple steps, Autonomous will automatically break those out into individual steps. You can go and parameterize variables there. You can set up API testing there. And the combination of these two will allow you to get maximum coverage in a very short amount of time. That your website test covering a vast majority of your pages, and then custom flow test for all of your important flows that you need to validate from a functional data perspective or API testing perspective. Now, let's jump into some of the ways that AI, and specifically some of the AI around visual AI and the NLP stuff that we do here at Applitools that will be able to help you out. One thing that I recommend doing for your critical paths through your application, for your critical pages, anything that's going to involve your home page, category pages, individual product pages where someone will be selecting a product, looking at reviews, making a purchase, going to their shopping cart, checking out, doing any sort of search or filtering. You want to make sure that you're either recording those or coding them directly so that you can validate all of the data that you need to along those paths, make sure that those are working from a functional perspective, visual perspective. And then visual AI is going to be able to help you out with a whole bunch of other issues that occur there. So like multi-screen shopping. As I mentioned before, obviously no one's doing this except for you guys who have all your devices directly at your desk and you're testing those out. But people will be shopping on their apps on their phones or on your mobile website, and then in a lot of cases, you'll hear about how millennials talk about making a laptop purchase versus a phone purchase. Usually this happens with like big ticket items. People don't want to be buying appliances or booking flights or anything that's going to cost them a lot directly through there. But purchases that are occurring during the holiday shopping season here are usually smaller purchases and lots of them. So as soon as some of the stats, up to 59% on Thanksgiving, 52% on during the rest of Cyber Week there. They're going to be very deep into the mobile purchases there. Some of them may finish on the other applications. So working with validating all those screen sizes, making sure that everything's working well with tablets, specifically iPads, seem to have a lot of issues because it's not it's not your phone size and it's not your laptop size. It's somewhere in between, and I see a lot of visual bugs that'll pop up in that space. And there's a large portion in the population that are making those purchases directly from their tablets. But you would probably see a lot of that in your analytics data as to what happened last year and what typically happens throughout the rest of the year as to which devices you actually need to be testing there. Now, data-rich scenarios. This is one where both the custom flow test that we do in Autonomous will allow you to be able to validate some of this data that's popping up there, but also things like the text that's used for product descriptions. Most of the time you're not handling that yourself. It's coming in through third parties that are creating those descriptions. And sometimes they'll overrun and move elements around, and this will create issues, especially if you're doing visual testing with like a pixel comparison tool, or if you're using a tool that's got visual AI, but it doesn't handle dynamic layouts particularly well. This will cause a lot of issues for them. Applitools handles this very well by allowing you to do layout match algorithms, which will validate the layout of the page, but ignore both text content or image content, and you can set it so that it's only doing it in certain regions on the screen, not just for the entire page or globally for your entire test, like some other tools will do. Dynamic content, obviously, homepage content for most of your sites. You're going to have a lot of different things, a lot of different promotions that are popping up there. You may have brick and mortar store locations that happen based off of location data, delivery address sort of estimated if someone's not logged in there. You'll have your promotions that are popping up as to, you can see like this on Lowe's up to 35% off here. There's going to be a whole different set of things that are happening each day, deals of the day. And then when they log in, you may have sections that are specific to them, and then like recommended searches here. So if we go on to personalization, all of those things are sort of highlighted when the person logs in, or when you've got a cookie there that's actually tracking them. You'll see there's new content that's there, even though it's the same URL. So if you're running that test on while logged in versus not logged in, you'll get a fair number of false positives if you're using another tool to validate that, or you'll miss it a lot of the times. If you're just coding the functional testing side of things, you won't be able to see things like, hey, this row here that didn't exist before, it's pushing down some of the content there and could cause issues with being able to click on things, and just visually it'll turn people off. Another thing that pops up with sort of dynamic content, there is localizations. So you may have differences between pages that are loaded for different geographic regions, different languages. You can see here ASOS actually has a slightly different layout for their American English website versus their French website, different promotions that are occurring there. So your visual AI with Applitools is able to figure out, hey, there's floating content here, there's a dynamic layout here. It's not that different, though. There's some spacing between the two snapshots here, but fundamentally it's basically the same stuff. So being able to ignore that, so it's not flagging every little thing that's popping up there. Because as a manual tester, I would look at this and say, yeah, it's totally fine. That's exactly what it's supposed to be. And I don't want to have to go through multiple variations of those because ASOS, I think, has something like 50 different languages that are set up there. So you don't want to have to go through every single one of those on multiple pages to be able to verify all of those scenarios. As I mentioned, A/B experiments are going to be big this season, particularly ones that are generated by AI. So it's going to be more difficult to test them or to predict sort of what those A/B experiments are going to be. A lot of the times your marketing department isn't exactly going to tell you every little experiment they're running. So when you run these tests, something that's important here that we can do with visual AI and Applitools and eyes is to be able to have multiple baselines for the same page and sort of group those together so that when you're running an A/B experiment on the same page, it knows which baseline to compare it to. So again, it's not producing all those false flags, so you don't have to go through and manually check every one. The automation part of this is very important for being able to keep up with all of the pages and all of the tests and all of the new code that's going to be pushed. And then finally here, accessibility. 4.4% of the population is not a small percentage to have to deal with things like color blindness, and then even more than that, people with low vision, or even just as you age, the ability to tell the difference between certain text sizes or contrasting colors diminishes. So Applitools has this automatic accessibility checker here that's going to check, or contrast checker, I should say, that's going to check the contrast of your colors, your buttons, and also check text sizes, make sure that you don't have anything that's too small, and that the contrast that's happening with the text is sufficient and passes all of the requirements that you're going to need. This is going to be huge next year with the European Accessibility Act. It's already sort of an issue with the Americans with Disabilities Act, and a few years ago, Supreme Court decided this case with Domino's, where someone who was ordering a pizza couldn't see things, didn't have the accessibility sorted on the site, and they sided with the person against Domino's in that case. So it's definitely something that will impact your company and needs to be part of your testing plan. So just to recap on what the Applitools Intelligence Plus testing platform does as a whole, again, at that authoring level, we've got autonomous eyes and also pre-flight for recording test, and as I mentioned, TestGen AI for Cypress. You can use any of those to author your test. So anyone from manual testers, test automation engineers, developers, even some digital marketers we've seen use these. Anyone, it's fairly easy to run those website scan tests and add those into autonomous with no testing skills whatsoever. Analysis wise, probably going to need some help there. But this will allow you to basically maximize your test coverage in a very short amount of time and have flexible test authoring capabilities. And then the visual AI data validations that we're doing with both of those products there, the functional testing, visual testing, API testing, and autonomous, and then functional, visual, and accessibility testing within eyes. That'll give you a huge amount of coverage and be able to validate most of your content that's happening there. And of course, cross-browser, cross-device, huge for what you're going to need to be able to do for the holiday season here. All of those mobile devices, all of those different screen sizes, even desktop screen sizes are varying wildly these days with Ultra HD pages. Not everyone's on a 1920 by 1080 like it used to be. And then automated maintenance, root cause analysis. You're not going to have a whole lot of time over the next couple of months. You should already be pretty deep into your holiday readiness testing. So being able to kick those back to development and show them exactly what's in the code that changed based off of what was flagged visually, that's super important, super helpful for you. Sort of make you the tester all-star to the development team. Always helpful there. And with that, I will open it up to questions. Martin, you want to join me up here for questions?
Okay, so we have a couple of questions. The first one is from Rolf. He asked, how is Figma connected to Applitools?
And Tim, I'll take that one. So Rolf, the way that we integrate with Figma is that we have a development plugin that plugs directly into Figma Desktop. And what the plugin essentially does is it allows you to export the Figma prototype directly to Applitools so that it can be used to establish the baseline. So that once the screen that you're developing is built, you can then run your test automation and compare the as built to as designed. So that's how we integrate with Figma inside of our intelligent testing platform.
I see another question about accessibility. And you spent a lot of time talking about that today, Tim. So how does Applitools perform accessibility validation?
Yeah, so the contrast checker, as I mentioned there, there's actually, I believe, 3 different levels of how it checks the contrast. Basically, it'll do color contrast comparison and then do text contrast comparison. Martin, you may know some more details about how it's doing that on the back end.
Yeah, for sure. So the way that operates is that inside of your automation framework, there's a configuration parameter that you set the minimum level of accessibility validation. So we use the WCAG standard 2.0 or 2.1. So you would set the minimum revision level, so 2.1, for example, and then within each revision level, there is both AA and AAA, which determines, how deep you want to cover. So you would set that inside your functional suite, and then as you run the test, we will automatically check every single screen for contrast violations, no matter if that is a web interface, a native mobile interface, or even a PDF document. And then you can highlight any of those violations as Tim showed in the presentation, report those as defects, etc. So it enables teams the ability to leverage your existing functional framework with the intelligence and accuracy of our algorithms to be able to compare not only visual differences, but the accessibility testing for color contrast in a single screenshot.
But I do see another question about workflow efficiency around cross-browser and cross-device testing. Tim, you want to talk about that, how Applitools makes workflows more efficient?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways that we can approach that. First, I mean, the ultrafast grid that we have is going to basically take that one recording that you have and render it across multiple browsers, multiple devices, and check all of those screens for you at sort of about 10 times faster than if you were doing it sequentially. All of that's going to happen in parallel, so your test runs are actually going to be significantly faster. Any differences that are occurring, we do monitor the way that each browser and operating system, like iOS and Android, are rendering these screens. So if there's like a difference between one version of a browser or another, we know when to ignore those things. And then you can basically, it'll group any changes that happen to a single baseline, so that if you do want to flag a bug, it'll do that for all the baselines that match that. Or if you want to say, no, this is fine, it'll take care of all of those, so you're not having to go through every single browser, every single device, and then validate each one as it's going through. And then we do something similar in Autonomous, where we're also leveraging cross-browser, cross-device testing on those. And it's using the same ultra-fast grid on the back end. And I see there's also one that is about Percy, and I can dig into some of that a little bit. That's some of the more detailed examples. So some of the things that are specific to e-commerce that Percy is not as good at. I'll hop back here for a couple of things just to show you. There we go. Okay. So when I was talking about these data-rich scenarios, anytime you're going to have a grid with products like this, these are all going to be dynamic, right? You're not going to have the same list of products that are showing up every single time, depending on who the user is, what they've looked for previously, how you're actually sorting these things. So Percy's sort of got this way of ignoring images. It doesn't ignore text differences particularly well. So all of the things that I have here outlined, if there's any differences that are occurring there, it's likely to flag those. It does have a layout sort of ignore, where it will just validate the layout on the page, but that often fails because you have to set it at the test level, not at each individual page. Doing layout by regions or ignore specific regions doesn't work well. I mean, they will claim that they've got visual AI, but when you dig into a lot of the claims that they're making there, it's not anywhere near the level that Applitools has been able to develop our AI. We've been doing it for over 10 years, or on over 4 billion application images, and worked out a lot of the issues that you would have over those years, and some of the customer corner cases that have been developed there. We've solved and iterated those, and it'll even do things like adding a row to a table will cause issues with it. There are a lot of really applicable things to e-commerce where it behaves more like a pixel comparison tool in a lot of those cases. Works pretty well when you've got mostly static content, mostly simple sites, some dynamic content. If the dynamic content is images, like ads, for example, it'll be able to handle those. But anything more complex like this, it's going to fail and produce a lot of false positives, obviously. So.
Thanks, Tim. And if you would like to see that in more detail, there's a link where you can set a quick call to discuss your specific use cases on the resources tab, or just go to applitools.info in 5x, applitools.info in 5x. We do know that many of you are already deep into your holiday readiness testing, but to meet the ever-increasing test coverage demands quickly and with minimal effort, we'd recommend that you give Autonomous a try. At Applitools, our mission is to provide unmatched business value by offering a platform that makes it simple for users of all skill levels to create powerful automated tests that can validate even the most complex scenarios. If you're already an Applitools customer, reach out to your account team to learn more about how you can get an Autonomous trial and take advantage of the strategies today. And if you're not yet an Applitools customer, you can see firsthand the speed and the coverage power by signing up for a free trial at the link below or at applitools.info UJB. Again, thank you for joining us today. We hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, everyone.